Welcome to day 211 of the New Way. We looked at the encounter between the rich young ruler and Jesus yesterday. Now we'll look at what Jesus taught the disciples afterward and see if we can find some answers. I'll read Matthew 19:23 through 26. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Truly I tell you, it is hard for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God." When the disciples heard this, they were greatly astonished and asked, "Who then can be saved?" Jesus looked at them and said, "With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible." And I'll read Mark 10:23 through 27. Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, "How hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God." The disciples were amazed at his words. But Jesus said again, "Children, how hard it is to enter the kingdom of God. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God." The disciples were even more amazed and said to each other, "Who then can be saved?" Jesus looked at them and said, "With man this is impossible, but not with God. All things are possible with God." Notice that the disciples were amazed at Jesus' teaching. Remember that in Jesus' time, and often today, people believed that if you were rich, you must be in a right relationship with God. They could not imagine it being any other way. We talked about this belief on day 71 and again on day 73. Much of their society was built around the rich, just as it is today. The rich could buy anything they wanted, especially the spiritual leaders' attention. Jesus says that that's not how God works. Let's read Luke's version in Luke 18:24 through 27. Jesus looked at him and said, "How hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. Indeed, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God." Those who heard this asked, "Who then can be saved?" Jesus replied, "What is impossible with man is possible with God." So does Jesus say that the rich cannot be saved? No, he says it is hard, but not impossible. But there's some background that might help clarify this teaching. There is a city gate leading into Jerusalem that is called the Needle's Eye. It is a small gate used as a night entrance, much smaller than the main gates. The only way you could get a camel through that gate would be to totally unload his baggage, have it kneel on a board, then men would have to pull it through the gate. So it was very difficult, but not impossible. Does Jesus say that everyone must sell everything in order to be saved? No, but we cannot buy a relationship with God with money, and we must make sure that our desire to obey Jesus is more important to us than our riches. The rich young ruler felt that he would lose his lifestyle, his friends, and his position of prestige in the community if he gave away his riches. He decided he wanted these things more than obedience to Jesus. So money was his god, his idol. He chose it instead of Jesus. I believe the only reason Jesus asked the young man to give up his wealth was because he already knew his heart. Jesus wanted him to realize that he had made money his god and was serving and obeying it because money was his master, not God. It is really hard to transfer our trust in riches to complete and total trust in Jesus. Who then can become a follower of Jesus? Jesus answers and says that salvation is not a man-made thing where you just join a club or sign on the dotted line. No, salvation is supernatural and can only be accomplished by God. Anyone, rich or poor, can invite Jesus into their God-shaped vacuum. When they do, amazing things begin to happen. Supernatural things. In fact, later we'll discuss that you become a totally new creation. In his service, Dale.